The coral throne room shimmered with bioluminescent fury. Ancient creatures, older than human memory, circled the accused like sharks scenting blood in the water. Kyle knelt before the Council of Tides, his silver tail coiled beneath him, chains of living kelp binding his wrists. "You saved a human." The Sea Queen's voice rippled through the depths, each word a current of disgust. Her crown of pearls and bone fragments gleamed in the phosphorescent light. "You violated the first law. You interfered with the surface world's natural order." Kale's heart hammered against his ribs. He could still feel the child's small hand slipping from his grasp, still see her terrified eyes as the riptide dragged her down. How could saving a life be a crime? She was a child, he signed desperately, his voice forbidden in this sacred chamber until judgment was passed. She would have died, as she was meant to. The eldest counselor, a creature more serpent than myrrh, coiled forward. "For 3,000 years we have maintained the separation. The surface dwellers do not belong to us. Their deaths feed the ecosystem. You have disrupted the balance." The Queen raised one pale hand. The water itself seemed to hold its breath. "Kyle, Prince of the Northern Currents, you are hereby severed from the ocean's embrace. You will walk the surface as they do, voiceless, vulnerable, mortal. Perhaps then you will understand why we let them drown." Kyle's eyes widened in horror. "No, please." But the magic was already moving. Pain exploded through his body as his tail began to split, scales tearing, flesh reforming. He screamed, but the sound caught in his throat as his vocal cords dissolved into silence. The last thing he heard before consciousness fled was the Queen's cold whisper, "If you love them so much, become one of them, forever." The sand was wrong. That was Kale's first coherent thought as consciousness dragged him toward waking. Sand wasn't supposed to feel like this, gritty, dry, heavy. It should have been fluid, suspended in water, dancing in currents. This sand just existed, dead, still. He tried to move, and agony lanced through his body. His tail. No, not a tail anymore. Legs. The word surfaced from some buried knowledge, but understanding didn't make the reality less horrifying. He had legs, 2 separate limbs where his powerful tail should have been. Kale forced his eyes open. Dawnlight, too bright, too harsh without the ocean's filter, stabbed into his retinas. He was on a beach, waves lapping weakly at the shore a few feet away. The sound of them was pathetic compared to the symphony of currents he'd known his entire life. He tried to call out, to summon help from any merfolk who might hear. His mouth opened, throat worked, but no sound emerged. Nothing, not even a whisper. The full weight of his punishment crashed over him like a rogue wave. Exiled, voiceless, human. Panic seized him. Kale tried to crawl toward the water. Maybe if he could just get back in, maybe the ocean would forgive him, take him back. His new limbs refused to cooperate, muscles firing wrong, balance completely alien. He collapsed after 3 feet, face first in the sand, tasting salt and grit and despair. The sun climbed higher. Kale lay there, trembling, as his body slowly acclimated to air instead of water, to gravity's cruel pull, to lungs that burned with each breath. He had no idea how long he remained there. Time felt different in this world, linear and relentless instead of fluid and cyclical. Footsteps, human footsteps, crunching in the sand, growing closer. Kale's heart seized. He should hide, should run, but his body wouldn't respond. The footsteps stopped beside him. "Oh my God." A woman's voice, breathless with shock. Kale managed to turn his head slightly. Through salt-crusted eyes he saw her, dark hair whipping in the sea breeze, gray eyes wide with concern, wearing strange surface-dweller garments. She knelt beside him, and he caught her scent, coffee and old books and something floral. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her hand touched his shoulder, warm and careful. "What happened to you?" Kale tried to speak, to explain, but only managed to open his mouth in a silent gasp. The woman's expression shifted from concern to alarm. "You're hurt. Don't try to talk." She pulled out a small device, a phone, some distant part of his mind supplied. "I'm calling for help." "No." Panic flooded through him. Kale grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, shaking his head frantically. He couldn't go to a hospital. They would ask questions he couldn't answer, run tests that would reveal what he was, what he'd been. The woman hesitated, studying his face. "You don't want me to call an ambulance?" He shook his head again, pleading with his eyes. She bit her lip, clearly torn. Okay, but you can't stay here. Can you walk? My place isn't far. It's just up the beach. I can help you there. Kyle nodded, though he had no idea if he could actually walk. With her support, he managed to get his legs under him. They shook violently, but held. Each step was a small agony, muscles learning their new purpose. The woman, small but stronger than she looked, bore much of his weight without complaint. I'm Isla, by the way, she said, as they stumbled across the sand. Marine biologist, which is lucky for you, I guess, since I'm usually the only one out here this early. Marine biologist, someone who studied the ocean. Cale's chest ached, with a longing so fierce it nearly buckled his knees. Isla's home was a small cottage perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the sea. Inside, it smelled like salt and old paper, with books stacked on every surface and charts covering the walls. Cale collapsed onto a worn couch, exhausted from the short walk. Let me get you some water, Isla said, disappearing into another room. Cale stared at his hands, still webbed between the fingers, he noticed with a jolt. He quickly curled them into fists as Isla returned with a glass. She helped him drink, and the fresh water was strange on his tongue, flat and lifeless compared to seawater. So, Isla said carefully, settling into a chair across from him. I'm going to assume you can't or won't tell me what happened. That's fine, but you're clearly in some kind of trouble. Her gray eyes studied him with uncomfortable intensity. Those look like defensive wounds on your arms, and you're terrified of getting authorities involved. Are you running from someone? Cale stared at her, at a loss. How could he possibly explain? Isla sighed. Look, I get it. I do. And I won't push. But you need rest, food, and probably medical attention. I'm offering shelter, at least for today. After that, she shrugged. We'll figure it out. He nodded slowly, grateful beyond words he couldn't speak. Can you write? Isla asked suddenly. Or sign language. Do you know any? Kyle shook his head to both. In the ocean, they communicated through gesture and telepathy, through the language of currents and bioluminescence. Human writing was foreign to him. Okay, we'll work on that. Isla stood, suddenly businesslike. First, you need to shower and get into clean clothes. Come on. She led him to a small bathroom. Kyle stared at the shower with trepidation. Water, but wrong. Heated, pressurized, trapped in pipes. Still, he was covered in sand and salt, and dried blood from wounds he didn't remember getting. When the water hit his skin, something inside him broke. It wasn't ocean water. It wasn't home. But it was still water, and his body remembered. Muscles relaxing, tension releasing. Kyle pressed his forehead against the tile and wept soundlessly, the shower masking his shaking shoulders. 3 days passed in a blur of confusion and small revelations. Isla gave him space, asked no questions, but left him paper and pencils. Kyle spent hours trying to draw what he couldn't say. The underwater palace, his transformation, the moment of his crime. But his hands, still adjusting to their new form, produced only crude sketches that frustrated him. He noticed things about Ela. The way she avoided looking at the ocean for too long. The photograph on her mantle of her with a young man, both laughing on a boat, that she touched each morning like a talisman. The way she threw herself into her work with desperate focus, as if staying busy kept some darkness at bay. She was lonely. He recognized it because he was lonely too. On the 4th morning, Cale woke to find Isla at the kitchen table, surrounded by books. She looked up when he entered, gestured for him to sit. I've been thinking, she said. You need a way to communicate, so I made these. She spread out a series of cards, each with a simple image and word. Water, food, sleep, yes, no, help. Point to what you need. We'll build from there. Cale's throat tightened with gratitude. He pointed to thank you, even though the words felt inadequate. Isla smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. You're welcome. They fell into a routine. Mornings, Isla taught him words, building a vocabulary card by card. Afternoons, she worked on her research while Cale explored the cottage, learning about the human world through her books and belongings. Evenings, they ate together in comfortable silence, communicating through gestures and shared glances. But the ocean haunted him. Every night, Kyle dreamed of drowning. Ironic, since he'd never needed to breathe underwater before. He dreamed of the council's judgment, of his mother's face when she learned of his banishment. Had she cried? Had she cared? Of the child's hand slipping from his grasp. He dreamed of swimming, of freedom, of home. He woke gasping, disoriented, grieving. 1 week after Isla found him, she took him outside. "Come on," she said. "I want to show you something." She led him down a path to a small protected cove. Tide pools dotted the rocks, teeming with small marine life. Isla crouched beside one, gesturing for him to join her. "Look," she whispered. A tiny octopus pulsed in the shallow water, color shifting from red to brown to gray. Cale's breath caught. Without thinking, he reached toward it, and the creature swam directly to his hand, tentacles wrapping around his fingers in greeting. Isla gasped. That's not normal. They usually hide from people." Cale pulled his hand back quickly, heart pounding. Too much. He'd revealed too much. But Isla was staring at him with new intensity. "Who are you?" Before he could respond, not that he could, a wave crashed over the rocks, much larger than it should have been given the calm sea. The water surged around them, and Kyle felt it, a pulse of recognition, of greeting, of longing. The ocean hadn't forgotten him, and judging by Isla's expression, wonder mixed with growing suspicion, she had just witnessed something impossible. The truth was rising to the surface, whether Kyle was ready or not. The walk back to the cottage was silent, tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. Isla kept glancing at Cale, her scientific mind clearly racing through explanations, discarding each one as insufficient. Kyle could feel her gaze on his still webbed fingers, the strange iridescence of his skin in certain light, the way sea creatures responded to his presence. Inside, Isla closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Okay, no more dancing around this. That octopus knew you. And that wave," she shook her head. "I've studied marine biology for 10 years. I've never seen anything like what just happened." Cale stood frozen in the center of the room, heart hammering. This was it. The moment where she would either understand or reject him entirely. He reached for the cards she'd made, but they felt hopelessly inadequate. How could simple words explain the impossible? "You're not human," Isla said softly. It wasn't a question. Kyle's hands trembled. Slowly he shook his head. Isla's breath hitched, but she didn't back away. Instead, she moved to her desk, pulled out a leather-bound journal, and began flipping through pages. After that day in the tide pools, I started researching. Local legends, folklore, ancient maritime records. She found a page and turned it toward him. "Is this what you are?" The illustration showed a merman, tail gleaming, rising from waves. Crude, simplified, but unmistakable. Cale nodded, throat tight. "Jesus Christ." Isla sank into a chair, rubbing her face. "Merfolk. Actual merfolk. And you're, what? Stranded here? Hurt?" He pointed to cards in sequence. "Hurt. Lost. Cannot go back." "Why not?" Her gray eyes were sharp with concern. "What happened to you?" This required more than cards. Cale grabbed paper and pencil, his improved motor control allowing for better sketches now. He drew quickly. A throne room, crowned figures, chains. A small human figure drowning, himself reaching out to save her. Then the transformation. Tail splitting into legs, a hand clutched at his throat to indicate his stolen voice. Isla watched, her expression shifting from confusion to horror to something like awe. "You saved someone. A human. And they punished you for it?" Cale nodded, relieved that she understood. "That's barbaric." Anger flashed in her eyes. "You saved a life. That should never be." She stopped abruptly, something clicking behind her eyes. "Wait, when did this happen? When did you save this person?" Kyle thought back. Time moved differently in the ocean, but he tried to calculate based on the moon phases he remembered. He held up his fingers. 2 hands twice, then 3 more fingers. 23 days ago. Isla went pale. She stood abruptly, crossed to a bookshelf, and pulled down a photo album. Her hands shook slightly as she flipped through pages, stopping on a newspaper clipping. "Is this her?" The photograph showed a beach, rescue workers, a small girl wrapped in a blanket. The headline read, "Miracle at Morrison Beach. Child survives impossible riptide. Cale's breath stopped. He pointed at the image, then nodded emphatically. Oh my God. Isla's voice was barely a whisper. That's my mother. This article, it's from 28 years ago. My grandmother kept it because she said it was divine intervention. Mom was 7 years old, got caught in a riptide during a family vacation. Everyone said she should have died. The current was too strong, she was too far out. But somehow, she made it back to shore. She always said she remembered hands, beautiful hands that glowed, pushing her toward the beach. The room seemed to spin. Cale gripped the edge of the table, his mind reeling. The child he saved had grown up, had a family, had this woman standing before him. You saved my mother's life, Isla breathed. Which means you're the reason I exist. Their eyes met, and something profound passed between them. A connection that transcended coincidence, that felt like destiny's invisible threads pulling tight. Isla moved closer, studying his face with new intensity. Did you know? When you saved her? Did you know it would lead to this? Cale shook his head. How could he have known? He'd simply seen a child drowning and reacted on instinct. The ocean took everything from you because you gave my family everything. Isla's voice cracked. That's not justice. That's cruelty. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his. The touch sent warmth flooding through him. For the first time since his exile, Cale didn't feel entirely alone. We'll figure this out, Isla said firmly. There has to be a way to reverse this, or at least, I don't know. But you're not going through it alone anymore. I promise. Over the following days, Isla threw herself into research with fierce determination. Her cottage became a war room, walls covered with maps of local maritime legends, tables stacked with ancient texts borrowed from university archives. Her laptop always open to forums discussing oceanic mythology. Cale helped where he could, his recognition of symbols and images proving invaluable. He'd point to certain glyphs that matched the script used in the coral throne room, or shake his head at obvious human fabrications. His voice was returning, slowly. Just whispers at first. Raw, broken sounds that hurt to produce. Isla encouraged him gently, teaching him words one syllable at a time. Wat, terror, he managed one afternoon, the words scraping from his damaged vocal cords. Isla's face lit up. Yes, water! You're doing amazing, Cale. His name. She'd asked him to write it phonetically, and hearing her say it made something in his chest ache with longing. They were growing closer, spending long evenings talking. Well, Isla talking while Cale listened, and occasionally contributed a hoarse word or gesture. She told him about her work studying climate change's impact on marine ecosystems, about her brother Daniel, who had died in a boating accident a year ago. We were on a research expedition, she said quietly one night, staring at his photograph. Freak storm came out of nowhere. The boat capsized. I made it to shore. He didn't. Her voice broke. They never found his body. The ocean just took him. Cale's hand found hers, squeezing gently. He understood loss now. The ocean had been his entire world, and it had cast him out. They were both grieving things the sea had stolen. I used to love the water, Isla whispered. Now I can barely look at it without feeling sick. But you, she glanced at him. You make me remember why I fell in love with the ocean in the first place. Their faces were close. Cale could smell the coffee on her breath, see the flecks of green in her gray eyes. His heart raced. Then Isla's laptop chimed, breaking the moment. She pulled away, cheeks flushed, and checked the screen. Oh, this is... Cale, look at this. She'd found a digitized manuscript from a monastery on the northern coast, dated 1347. The text was in Old English, but Isla had run it through translation software. And it was written in the time before time, when the mothers of the deep first laid the laws, that should land and sea unite in true love's bond, the very tides themselves shall bend. But beware, for such union brings either transcendence or destruction. The lovers who bridge the worlds must choose, surrender all, or lose all. It's a prophecy, Isla breathed, about someone from the sea and someone from land falling in love. And look, there's more. She scrolled down to an illustration. 2 figures, one clearly merfolk and one human, hands clasped, surrounded by symbols that made Cale's blood run cold. He recognized them. They were the same symbols carved into the council chamber floor. The ocean knows about this, Isla said slowly, understanding dawning. They've always known. Kyle, what if your banishment wasn't random? What if they sent you here because of this prophecy? No, Kale managed, the word harsh and broken. He didn't want to believe his punishment was calculated, part of some grand design. He wanted it to be simple. He'd broken a rule, paid the price, but Isla was already pulling up more sources. Look, references to the prophecy appear across multiple cultures. Polynesian legends, Celtic myths, even ancient Greek texts. It's always the same core story. Sea and land united. Power to change the world, but at terrible cost. She turned to face him fully. What if we're part of this? What if you saving my mother wasn't coincidence, but the prophecy beginning to unfold? Kel shook his head stubbornly, but doubt gnawed at him. The timing was too perfect, the connection too strong. And lately, he'd noticed strange occurrences. Tides that shifted when Isla was near, shells that arranged themselves in patterns outside her door, the way marine life seemed drawn to her presence when he was around. We need to know more, Isla said decisively. There's someone who might help. Professor Yates at the university. He's an expert in maritime anthropology and has a private collection of artifacts the museum won't touch because they're too fantastical. And if anyone can tell us about this prophecy, it's him. Professor Yates lived in a cluttered Victorian house that smelled of pipe tobacco and old parchment. He was elderly, sharp-eyed, and greeted Isla with genuine warmth. Miss Isla, delightful to see you. And who's this? He studied Kale with unconcealed curiosity. This is Kale, Isla said carefully. He's helping me with a research project. We need to ask you about the prophecy of tides. Yates' expression shifted immediately. That's not a subject for casual inquiry, my dear. That prophecy has teeth. Why the interest? Isla glanced at Kale, who nodded permission. They'd agreed. Yates needed to know the truth. She took a breath. Because I think we're living it. Over the next hour, they showed Yates everything. Kale's sketches, the manuscript Isla found, documentation of the strange phenomena occurring around them. Yates listened without interruption, his expression growing graver by the minute. Finally, he set down his pipe. You understand what you're suggesting, that this young man is actually mere folk, and that you two are the fulfillment of a 3,000-year-old prophecy? I know how it sounds, Isla began. Show me, Yates interrupted, looking at Kale. If you're what you claim, prove it. Kale hesitated, then held out his hands. The webbing between his fingers was obvious in good light. He pulled up his sleeves, revealing the scale-like patterns still faintly visible on his forearms. Then, with difficulty, he spoke. I was Prince of Northern Currents. Yates went very still. Your vocal cords, they're not human. The resonance is all wrong. There's an echo, like sound traveling through water. He stood abruptly. Come with me, both of you. He led them to a locked room in the basement. Inside, shelves held artifacts that made Isla gasp. Clearly ancient, clearly valuable, and clearly depicting merfolk in various forms. Yates pulled out a trident, carved from what looked like narwhal horn. This was found off the coast of Norway in 1823. The symbols on it match nothing in any human language. He handed it to Kyle. Can you read it? Kyle's hands shook as he took the trident. The moment his fingers touched it, the symbols began to glow faintly blue. He read aloud, his voice stronger when speaking his native tongue. By the authority of the deep mothers, let none pass who bear ill intent to the ocean's children. Yates sank into a chair. Merciful God, it's all true. Tell us about the prophecy, Isla urged. Everything you know. Yates collected himself. The prophecy of tides appears in every maritime culture because it's not myth, it's history, or perhaps prehistory. The texts suggest that long ago, humans and merfolk lived in harmony. But something happened. A betrayal, a war. The sources aren't clear. The worlds were separated, and contact forbidden. But the prophecy promises reunification, Isla said, at a cost. Yates fixed them with a serious look. Every version includes the same warning. The union of sea and land requires perfect sacrifice. One world must yield to the other, or both will be destroyed in the attempt. What does that mean? Kale forced out. Sacrifice? I don't know. But I know this. If the ocean sent you here, and if you two are indeed fulfilling the prophecy, then forces beyond your control are at work. The sea is not forgiving, Miss Isla. If it wants something, it will take it, with or without your consent. As if in response to his words, the lights flickered. The house groaned. Outside, they heard a sound like distant thunder, though the sky had been clear moments ago. Kyle's skin prickled with primal recognition. "Storm," he whispered. They rushed outside. Dark clouds were rolling in from the ocean with unnatural speed, and the sea itself had turned violent, waves crashing far beyond the normal tide line. "That's not natural," Isla said, fear creeping into her voice. The forecast showed clear skies for days. Kale knew better. This was no ordinary storm. He could feel the ocean's rage, its jealousy, its demand. It had given him time to live among humans, to understand what he'd given up. Now it wanted him back. Isla's phone rang. She answered, her face going pale. "What? When?" She hung up, turning to Kale with terrified eyes. "The Marine Research Station. There's been a massive swell. It's flooding. My entire team is trapped inside." "Go," Yates said urgently. "I'll gather what resources I can about the prophecy. But be careful, both of you. The ocean is testing you." They raced back to Isla's truck. As they drove toward the research station, the storm intensified. Rain hammered the windshield, wind buffeting the vehicle. But what made Kale's blood run cold was the sense of intention behind it all. The ocean wasn't just angry, it was hunting. The research station was chaos. Water poured through broken windows, equipment sparked and died, and 6 people were trapped on the second floor as the first floor flooded. Emergency services couldn't get through. The roads were impassable, the storm too violent. "I have to help them," Isla said, already moving toward the building. Kale grabbed her arm. "Dangerous. They're my colleagues, my friends." Tears mixed with rain on her face. "I can't just let them drown." The word hit Kale like a physical blow. Drown. The reason he was here. The child, Isla's mother, he'd saved from drowning. And now history was repeating itself. But this time, he had no tail, no gills, no supernatural strength. He was as human and vulnerable as Isla herself. He looked at the churning water flooding the station, then at Isla's desperate face. The decision was instant. Kyle pulled her into a fierce kiss. Their first, pouring everything unsaid into it. Then he released her and ran toward the building. "Kale! No!" Isla screamed. He dove into the water. The cold was shocking, but familiar. The moment he submerged, muscle memory took over. His weak human legs kicked with growing efficiency. His lungs burned. He needed air now, where before he'd never needed to breathe, but he pushed forward. The storm seemed to recognize him. Currents swirled around him, not attacking, but welcoming, testing. The water whispered in voices he'd thought lost forever. "Come home, come back, abandon the surface and return to us." Kyle ignored them, swimming deeper into the flooded station. He found the stairs, pulled himself up to the second floor. 6 people huddled there, water rising rapidly around them. "Who the hell?" one of them started. "Follow me," Kyle rasped. "Can get you out." "The water's too high," a woman protested. "We can't swim through that." But Kyle was already moving, and something in his voice, perhaps the ocean's authority still lingering, made them obey. One by one, he guided them to the windows, helped them through, showed them how to ride the currents rather than fight them. The last person was a young man, maybe 20, paralyzed with fear. "I can't," he sobbed. "I can't do it." Kale grabbed his face, forcing eye contact. "Trust me. Ocean will not take you. I promise." Something in the water shifted. Kale felt it, a pulse of acknowledgement, of respect. The ocean was listening. He'd commanded it in his prince's voice, and despite his banishment, despite his human form, some part of it still recognized his authority. They made it to shore. All 6 people. Safe. Isla crashed into Kale, sobbing with relief. "You idiot! You could have died!" He held her tightly, feeling his heart hammer against hers. "Worth it," he whispered. The storm was already beginning to calm, clouds breaking apart, rain softening to drizzle. But Kyle saw something that made his blood freeze. Standing at the water's edge was a figure, tall, female, with skin that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Her eyes were pure black, ancient and cold. An emissary. The ocean had sent an emissary. Kyle of the northern currents, she said, her voice like waves over stone. You were banished, yet you still command our waters. You were made human, yet you still swim like one of us. The ocean is perplexed. Isla moved protectively in front of Kyle. Who are you? What do you want? The emissary's black eyes fixed on her. I am Mira, voice of the deep, and I come with a message from the Council of Tides. She smiled, showing 2 sharp teeth. They know about the prophecy. They know about your bond, and they offer a choice. What choice? Kale demanded. Return to the ocean and accept eternal imprisonment in the abyss. And this woman, this entire coastline, will be spared the sea's wrath. Mira's smile widened. Or refuse, and we will take from her what was taken from you. Starting with her voice, then her mobility, then her life. Piece by piece she will suffer as payment for your defiance. No! Isla shouted. But Mira was already fading back into the waves. You have until the next new moon. 7 days. Choose wisely, exiled prince. The ocean's patience has limits. She vanished into the surf, leaving Kale and Isla standing in the rain, the weight of an impossible decision crushing down on them. Isla turned to him, tears streaming. We'll find another way. There has to be another way. But Kale knew the ocean, knew its ancient pride, its merciless justice. There was no negotiating with the sea. One of them would drown. The only question was, which one? 5 days remained. Isla's cottage had become a fortress of research, every available surface covered with texts, translations, and desperate theories. Professor Yates visited daily, bringing new artifacts and ancient records. But nothing offered a solution. Only variations of the same grim message. The prophecy demands sacrifice. Kale watched Isla work herself to exhaustion, dark circles forming under her eyes, her hands trembling as she cross-referenced yet another manuscript. She refused to sleep, refused to eat properly, as if sheer determination could rewrite destiny itself. There's a reference here, she said on the 3rd day, voice hoarse, to a ritual that might sever the prophetic bond. If we're not connected, the ocean has no leverage. No. Kale's voice was stronger now, almost fully recovered. He crossed to her, gently taking the book from her hands. Isla, stop. I can't stop. I won't let you. I've decided. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I'm going back. To the abyss. It's the only way to keep you safe. She jerked away from him, anger flashing. Absolutely not. I don't accept that. It's not your choice. Like hell it isn't. Isla's voice broke. You think I can just let you sacrifice yourself? After everything? Kale, She stopped, breathing hard. I love you. There. I said it. I love you. And I'm not losing you to that fucking ocean. The words hung between them, raw and real. Kyle's heart felt like it was being crushed and freed simultaneously. I love you too, he whispered. That's why I have to go. I won't let them hurt you. Then we fight. Isla grabbed his hands fiercely. Together. We find a way to change the prophecy, to give them what they want without losing each other. How? Kyle demanded, frustration bleeding through. We've read every text, consulted every expert. The prophecy is clear. Sea and land united requires sacrifice. One world must yield. Professor Yates, who had been silent in the corner, suddenly stood. Wait, say that again. One world must yield, Isla repeated. Not one person. One world. Yates began pacing, excitement building. We've been interpreting this wrong. The sacrifice isn't about you dying or Kale returning. It's about the worlds themselves making a sacrifice. The ocean must sacrifice its isolation. Humanity must sacrifice its ignorance. Kale shook his head. The council will never agree. They've maintained separation for millennia. Then we don't ask the council. Yates pulled out an ancient scroll, one Kale hadn't seen before. This text mentions the Deep Mothers, the original beings who created the merfolk and established the first laws. They predate the council by eons. If anyone has the authority to reinterpret the prophecy, it's them. The Deep Mothers are myth, Kale said, though his voice wavered. Stories we tell mare children. They haven't been seen in 1,000 years, because no one has given them reason to appear. Yates looked between them. But if the prophecy itself is at stake, if the union of sea and land is actually happening, they might reveal themselves. They'd have to. Isla's eyes lit with desperate hope. How do we summon them? You can't, Kyle said flatly. No one summons the deep mothers. They come when they choose, if they choose. Or, Yates said carefully, when the impossible occurs, when a human willingly enters the ocean's heart, offering themselves in exchange for merfolk. That's never happened before. That might be enough to wake them. Isla went very still. You're saying I should offer to take Kale's place, become the sacrifice. No, Kale shouted, but Isla was already nodding slowly. It makes sense. The prophecy speaks of union, of worlds yielding. What if the answer isn't one of us dying, but one of us transforming? If I become merfolk, you'd lose everything, Kale interrupted desperately. Your humanity, your family, your life here. Isla, you don't understand what you'd be giving up. She smiled sadly. I understand perfectly, and I'm willing to give it up for you. 2 days remained when they made their decision. They would go to the ocean together. Isla would offer herself as a willing sacrifice, not to die, but to transform, to become what Kale had been. If the deep mothers appeared, they would plead their case, that the prophecy could be fulfilled through unity rather than destruction. If the deep mothers didn't appear, then at least Isla's sacrifice would satisfy the council's demands, and Kale would be free. I don't like this, Kale said for the 100th time as they prepared. Every instinct I have is screaming that this is wrong. Your instincts wanted you to surrender to the abyss. Isla checked the waterproof bag containing the translated prophecy texts. My instincts say we fight. Together. Professor Yates had given them a location. A deep trench off the northern coast, where ancient structures suggested merfolk holy sites. If the deep mothers exist anywhere, he'd said, it's there. They chartered a boat, telling the captain they were doing deep-sea research. The sun was setting as they reached the coordinates, the ocean turning blood red in the dying light. Isla looked at Kale, tried to smile. So, any advice for someone about to drown themselves on purpose? Don't. He pulled her close, memorizing the feel of her. Please, we can still turn back. No, we can't. She kissed him softly. Trust me. Trust us. Trust that love is stronger than ancient laws. She put on the diving weights. Professor Yates had provided them, along with a rebreather that would give her perhaps 20 minutes. After that, she'd either transform or die. Kale couldn't wear the equipment. His mere physiology was already reasserting itself in the water, making human diving gear incompatible. He'd have to rely on whatever remained of his oceanic nature. Ready? Isla asked. No, he'd never be ready to watch her risk everything. But he nodded anyway. They jumped together. The water closed over them like a coffin lid. Kale's body sang with relief at being home, muscles remembering their true purpose. But Isla struggled. Even with the rebreather, the weights dragging her down into darkness, he stayed close, guiding her as they descended. The trench opened beneath them like a mouth, walls covered in bioluminescent creatures that illuminated ancient carvings. Symbols Kale recognized from his earliest memories, from stories his mother had told him before he'd learned to swim properly. This place was sacred, old beyond measuring. At 200 feet, Isla's rebreather began to fail. Kale could see panic in her eyes, her body starting to fight the descent. But she didn't try to surface. She'd made her choice. At 300 feet, the rebreather died completely. Isla's scream was silent, bubbles erupting from her mouth. Cal caught her as she convulsed, lungs burning, body beginning to shut down. He pressed his mouth to hers, trying to share air from his mere lungs, but it wasn't enough. She was drowning. No! Kale's shout echoed through the water, carrying the authority of his lost princehood. Deep mothers, if you exist, if you ever cared for your children, show yourselves. Don't let her die. The water itself seemed to hold its breath. Then light exploded around them. They came not as beings, but as presence, vast, ancient, consciousness so old that human and merfolk alike were mere children in comparison. The deep mothers manifested as 3 pillars of light, each a different color. Blue for the ocean, green for the land, white for the space between. Why have you called us? The voice was everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through water and flesh and bone. Kale held Isla's limp body, Her lips blue, her eyes closed. "She's dying," he choked out. She offered herself willingly, a human choosing to become merfolk, to fulfill the prophecy. "Please, save her. Take me instead if you want sacrifice, but don't let her die." Interesting. A mer prince willing to remain human for love of a surface dweller, a human willing to become merfolk for love of an exile. "You understand what you ask?" "I understand nothing," Kale said desperately, "except that I love her. Isn't that what the prophecy is about? Union? We want to unite. We want to bridge the worlds, but not through death, through love." The lights pulsed, considering. The Council of Tides believes the prophecy speaks of dominance, one world conquering the other, but they misunderstand. They always have. The green light moved closer to Isla, surrounding her. Kale felt her body spasm, then go still. "What are you doing to her?" he demanded. What she asked for. Transformation. But true transformation is not merely physical. It is death of oneself and birth of another. "No, she doesn't have to die." "She does. The human Isla must die, so the Mer Isla can be born. Just as the Mer Kyle died, so the human Kyle could be born. This is the sacrifice. The prophecy demands, not of life, but of identity." Kale went very still, understanding dawning. His exile hadn't been punishment. It had been transformation. The council thought they were destroying him, but the Deep Mothers had been guiding him toward this moment all along. Now you see. The prophecy speaks of perfect sacrifice, each giving up their world to meet in the middle. You became human for her. She will become mere for you. And in that exchange, the worlds will finally unite. But will she remember? Kale's voice cracked. Will she still be Isla? That is her choice to make. The green light intensified, and Isla's body began to change. Her legs fused, skin becoming iridescent scales, gills opening at her throat. Her lungs, designed for air, transformed into mer lungs that filtered oxygen from water. Her hair lightened to seafoam white. Her eyes shifted to oceanic blue. She gasped, drawing water into her new lungs, and her eyes flew open. For a moment she looked at Kale without recognition. Terror seized him. Had she forgotten everything? Had the transformation erased the woman he loved? Then she smiled. "Kale," she whispered, her voice now carrying that distinctive oceanic resonance. "I can hear the whales singing. I can feel the currents. Oh my God, this is..." She looked down at her tail in wonder. "This is incredible." Relief crashed through him so powerfully that he nearly sobbed. "The transformation is complete," the Deep Mothers said, "but the prophecy is not yet fulfilled. A choice remains." The three lights merged, forming a vortex of power that pulled both Kale and Isla into its center. Suddenly they weren't in the trench anymore, but in a space between spaces, neither ocean nor land, but something else entirely. Before them, the Deep Mothers took shape. Three massive beings, each part humanoid, part oceanic creature, part something beyond comprehension. "What choice?" Isla asked, her new voice strong and clear. "The worlds remain separated. The Council of Tides continues to enforce isolation. Humanity continues to poison the seas. The prophecy can either reinforce this division or shatter it forever." The first mother, blue as the abyss, spoke. "If you choose to stay hidden, if you remain in the ocean and never reveal yourselves to the surface world, the balance will continue. Merfolk will remain myth. Humanity will remain ignorant." The second mother, green as seaweed, spoke. "But if you choose to reveal yourselves, to become ambassadors between worlds, everything changes. The separation ends. Merfolk and humans will have to learn to coexist." The third mother, white as seafoam, spoke. "This is the true sacrifice, giving up safety for possibility, giving up isolation for unity. It is dangerous, many will resist, but it is the only path to true harmony." Kale and Isla looked at each other. 1,000 words passed between them without sound. "We choose unity," Isla said firmly. "We choose to bridge the worlds," Kale added. "Then so shall it be." The vortex exploded outward, and they were thrown back into the trench. But something fundamental had changed. Kale could feel it. The walls between worlds thinning, the ancient isolation spell cracking. Above them, On the surface, they heard screams, not of terror, but of wonder. They surfaced together to find chaos. The ocean around their boat was filled with merfolk, hundreds of them, rising from the depths as the separation spell shattered. The veil that had hidden them for millennia was gone. The boat captain stood frozen, camera phone shaking in his hands, capturing the impossible. But Kale barely noticed, because swimming toward them, her face twisted with rage, was the Sea Queen herself, flanked by the entire Council of Tides. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "You've broken the first law. You've exposed us all." "No," Kyle said calmly. "We've fulfilled the prophecy. The Deep Mothers themselves blessed our union. The separation is over. The Deep Mothers are myth, are we?" The voice silenced every merfolk in the water. The three mothers rose from the depths, their forms visible even to human eyes now, massive and terrible and beautiful. "The Council of Tides has forgotten its purpose," they said. "You were meant to guard the ocean, not isolate it. You were meant to guide humanity, not abandon it." The Sea Queen's face went pale. "But the old laws were written for a different time. Times change. Oceans change. Laws must change with them." The mothers turned to Kale and Isla. "You have begun something that will reshape the world. The path ahead is uncertain. Many challenges remain, but you will not walk it alone." They looked at each other. Isla now had a tail, belonged to the ocean. Kale was still human, belonged to the land. They were impossible, and yet they were here. "What happens now?" Isla asked. "Now," the mother said, "you teach both worlds how to love what they once feared."